Not all men are created equal. That was the harsh, undeniable reality of the world, a truth most children learned by the time they were 4 years old. In a society where 80% of the global population possessed some kind of uncanny, superhuman ability known as a quirk, the genetic lottery was everything. It dictated careers, social standings, and destinies. If you were born with a weak quirk, the ability to pull your eyes out of their sockets, or slightly elongate your fingers, you were destined for a mundane life. If you were born quirkless, you were effectively a ghost, a relic of an evolutionary past long forgotten. But if you were born with power? If you struck gold in the chromosomal roulette? The world was yours to shape. Izuku Midoriya learned this truth at the age of 4, standing in the center of a sterile pediatrician's office, bathed in the soft, clinical glow of fluorescent lights. "It's remarkable," Mrs. Midoriya, the bald, eccentric doctor had said, holding up an X-ray of Izuku's skull. He adjusted his thick, round spectacles, a wide grin breaking across his weathered face. "Your son is not only going to develop a quirk, but he has the genetic markers of an absolute powerhouse. The dual joint in the pinky toe is absent, as expected. But look here, at the cranial structure." Inko Midoriya, a slender woman with kind green eyes and an inherent tendency to worry, leaned forward, clutching her purse. Is he going to be okay, doctor? His father can breathe fire, and I can pull small objects towards me. What exactly are we looking at? The doctor chuckled, turning to the tiny, green-haired boy sitting on the examination table. Izuku was kicking his red sneakers back and forth, humming the theme song of the #1 hero, All Might. "Oh, he's going to be more than okay," the doctor assured her. "His quirk is a highly complex, ultra-rare mutation that seems to have combined the telekinetic nature of your quirk with a hyper-accelerated cellular generation trait. Go on, Izuku. Try focusing on the top of your head." 4-year-old Izuku blinked. He scrunched up his freckled face in deep concentration. He imagined a tightness at his temples. Suddenly, a soft pop echoed in the room. From the sides of his curly green hair, 2 small, ivory-white horns sprouted. They weren't demonic or monstrous. They were sleek, smooth, and elegant, curving slightly backward like a crown. Inko gasped. "Horns? Watch this," the doctor whispered. Izuku felt an instinctual tug in his mind. He reached up, his small, chubby fingers grasping the right horn. With a gentle tug, it detached from his scalp without a single drop of blood or ounce of pain. The moment it left his head, another identical horn instantaneously grew in its place to fill the gap. But the real magic happened next. Izuku looked at the detached horn in his hand, then let it go. It didn't fall to the linoleum floor. Instead, it hovered in midair, bathed in a faint, emerald-green aura. Izuku giggled, waving his hand. The horn zipped across the room with the speed of a dart, doing loop-de-loops around the doctor's head before stopping on a dime and hovering gently above Izuku's palm. "Incredible," the doctor breathed. "Instantaneous keratin bone generation, coupled with absolute, localized telekinetic dominion over the detached constructs. He can generate them, detach them, and control them with his mind. And given the density of the material, well, Mrs. Midoriya, if your boy wants to be a hero, he's got the arsenal for it." Izuku's eyes widened, shining like twin emeralds. He looked at the floating, ivory blade. An arsenal. From that day on, Izuku Midoriya was never looked down upon. He was never the fragile, quirkless boy destined to be trampled by a superhuman society. He was the boy with the crowned arsenal, and he was going to be the greatest hero the world had ever seen. 10 years later, the sound of chalk snapping against a blackboard echoed through the classroom of Aldera Junior High. Dust motes danced in the afternoon sun that filtered through the large windows. The students were a kaleidoscope of mutations and abilities. Some had rock-like skin, others had extra appendages, and some simply looked like normal teenagers. So, the homeroom teacher began, leaning against his podium and waving a stack of thick papers in the air. "As third-year students, it's time to start thinking seriously about your futures and what you want to do with your lives. I could pass out these career aptitude tests, but..." He suddenly threw the papers into the air, a wide grin on his face. "Why bother? I know you all want to go to the hero track." The classroom erupted. Quirks flared to life in a chaotic display of adolescent excitement. A boy's arm elongated, another breathed a small puff of fire, a girl's hair turned into flowing water. Yes, you all have wonderful quirks, the teacher said, holding up a hand to calm the room. But remember, using your quirks in school is strictly against the rules. Sensei, don't lump me in with these useless extras. The harsh, arrogant voice cut through the clamor like a hot knife through butter. The class quieted down, turning their attention to the back row. Katsuki Bakugo sat with his feet propped up on his desk, an arrogant smirk plastered across his face. He leaned back, letting off small, crackling explosions from his palms that smelled distinctly of burnt sugar and nitroglycerin. I'm not going to be stuck at the bottom with the rest of this trash, Bakugo boasted, his crimson eyes gleaming with fierce ambition. I've aced all the mock tests. I'm the only one here who has the stuff to get into UA High School. I'll surpass All Might and become the top hero, and my name will be carved into the annals of history. Oh, right, the teacher said, glancing at a clipboard. Bakugo, you are aiming for UA High, aren't you? The class murmured in awe. UA High? The national school? Their acceptance rate is less than 0.2%. Bakugo stood up, slamming his hands on the desk. That's right. I'm going to. Actually, Bakugo isn't the only one. The teacher's voice interrupted his rant. The man adjusted his glasses, looking at the opposite side of the room. Midoriya is also going for UA. The entire class turned their heads. Sitting by the window, Izuku Midoriya didn't flinch. He wasn't cowering, nor was he shaking under the weight of the room's attention. He was calmly spinning a pen in his right hand. In his left hand, hovering just an inch above his palm, a beautifully crafted, 6-inch ivory dagger made of pure bone keratin was spinning in the opposite direction, suspended by his telekinetic will. Izuku stopped the pen and the horns simultaneously. He looked up, offering a polite, confident smile. Yeah, Izuku said, his voice calm and steady. UA has the best heroics program in the country. It's the logical choice. Instead of mocking him, the class erupted into a second wave of murmurs, this time filled with genuine respect. Of course Midoriya is going. Did you see him take out that older kid who tried to mug us last year? He didn't even move. His quirk is insane. If anyone can get in, it's him and Bakugo. Bakugo's eye twitched. The explosive blonde slowly turned his head, locking eyes with Izuku. The rivalry between them was a palpable, living thing that had existed since they were toddlers. In another lifetime, where Izuku was powerless, Katsuki Bakugo might have become a tyrant, bullying Izuku to mask his own insecurities. But in this world, Izuku was a prodigy. And Bakugo hated being second best. Deku, Bakugo growled, using the childhood nickname he had coined. He meant it to mean wooden figure or blockhead, but over the years, it had evolved into a term of grudging rivalry. Don't think you can ride my coattails into UA. I'm taking the #1 spot in the entrance exam. I'll blast those stupid horns of yours into dust if you get in my way. Izuku didn't lose his smile. He reached up with his free hand, tapping the side of his head. Instantly, a pristine, sharp horn grew from his temple. He grasped it, detached it with a soft snick, and tossed it into the air. His emerald aura caught it, and it began to orbit his head like a satellite alongside the small dagger. You're welcome to try Kaken, Izuku replied evenly. But you know explosions don't do much against titanium density armor. Focus on your blast radius, or you'll end up burning out your palms before the exam even starts. Bakugo bared his teeth, small explosions popping on his skin. Stop analyzing me, you damn nerd. Settle down, both of you, the teacher sighed, though he couldn't hide his own impressed smirk. Having 2 UA candidates from a public middle school was going to do wonders for his resume. As the bell rang, signaling the end of the school day, the students packed up their bags. Izuku carefully placed his 2 detached horns back into his backpack. He didn't like leaving them around. While they naturally degraded into dust after a few days if he stopped supplying them with his telekinetic energy, they were still incredibly sharp and technically biological weapons. He pulled out a thick, burnt orange notebook titled Hero Analysis for the Future, Volume 13. Izuku's quirk was phenomenal, but his true strength lay in his mind. Because his power required immense spatial awareness and tactical planning to use effectively, controlling up to 24 projectiles simultaneously in a 100-meter radius required a mind like a supercomputer. Izuku had trained himself to analyze everything. Battles, quirks, physics, psychology. He absorbed information like a sponge. Slinging his yellow backpack over his shoulder, Izuku walked out of the classroom, breathing in the crisp afternoon air. The city of Mizudafu was bustling, a concrete jungle filled with vibrant life and everyday miracles. Heroes patrolled the skies, and villains lurked in the shadows. Izuku decided to take the shortcut home, walking under a large overpass. He was reviewing his notes on the newly debuted hero, Empty Lady, muttering under his breath about the collateral damage constraints of a gigantification quirk in a dense urban environment. He was so engrossed in his notebook that he almost didn't hear the wet, squelching sound echoing from the sewer grate behind him. Gurgle. Squelch. Izuku stopped walking. His combat instincts, honed through years of self-directed training, flared to life. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up. A medium-sized invisibility cloak. A gravelly, wet voice hissed from the shadows. Perfect. You look strong, kid. Izuku spun around. Emerging from the sewer grate was a massive, undulating mass of dark green, foul-smelling sludge. It had two large, manic-looking eyes and a jagged mouth full of decaying teeth. The sludge villain lunged forward, extending thick, viscous tendrils meant to wrap around Izuku's mouth and suffocate him. Don't worry, the villain gurgled, his eyes wide with desperate malice. It'll only hurt for about 45 seconds. Then, it'll all be over. An ambush, Izuku thought, his mind moving 100 miles a minute. Fluid body. Physical strikes won't work. Suffocation hazard. I need to keep him at a distance and target his solid points, the eyes and teeth. Izuku didn't panic. He didn't scream. He simply raised his right hand. Tap. 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 In a fraction of a second, Izuku tapped his head 6 times. 6 beautifully curved, ivory horns manifested, detached, and shot forward before the villain could even blink. Guided by Izuku's emerald telekinesis, they moved with the speed and precision of heat-seeking missiles. Crowned arsenal, phalanx formation. 4 of the horns suddenly morphed, their shapes flattening and widening until they resembled overlapping kites' shields. They slammed together in midair, forming a solid, impenetrable wall of bone keratin between Izuku and the incoming sludge. The villain's tendrils crashed against the shield, splattering harmlessly. What the? The villain shrieked, recoiling as the sheer hardness of the horns sent a shockwave through his liquid body. What kind of quirk is that? The kind that's going to hold you here for the police, Izuku said calmly from behind his floating barricade. With a flick of his wrist, the remaining 2 horns elongated into sharp, 2-meter-long javelins. They shot around the sides of the shield, plunging directly toward the villain's large, bulbous eyes. The villain screamed, instinctively pulling his eyes deep into his sludge body to avoid being blinded. But that was exactly what Izuku wanted. By forcing the villain to retract his only solid organs, he blinded the attacker. Izuku immediately commanded the 4 shield horns to shift back into long, curved blades. He sent them spiraling around the villain, creating a high-speed, swirling vortex of sharp edges that trapped the sludge inside a localized tornado of death. If the villain tried to extend a tendril, it was instantly sliced off. Damn you, you little brat! The villain roared from inside the cage of flying blades, trying to find an opening. Izuku pulled his phone out of his pocket with his free hand, keeping his telekinetic focus absolute. I'm calling the authorities. I suggest you stay still. My horns are as hard as titanium. You're just going to exhaust yourself trying to break through. Just as Izuku dialed the first digit of the emergency number, the manhole cover behind the villain exploded outward with the force of a bomb. Have no fear, citizen. The voice boomed through the tunnel, deep, resonant, and overflowing with absolute, unshakable confidence. The sheer pressure of the voice made the air vibrate. Izuku's eyes widened. He knew that voice. Everyone in the world knew that voice. A massive figure stepped out of the shadows. He was at least 7 feet tall, practically vibrating with muscle mass. He wore a simple white t-shirt and olive cargo pants. But his imposing physique and the 2 distinct V-shaped tufts of blonde hair on his head gave him away instantly. His smile was blinding. All Might. The number one hero. The symbol of peace. For I am here. All Might roared. The sludge villain shrieked in absolute terror. No! Not you! All Might reeled back his fist. The air around his arm seemed to warp and distort from the sheer kinetic energy gathering within his muscles. Izuku instantly recognized what was about to happen. He's going to use wind pressure. My horns will be blown away. With a sharp mental command, Izuku recalled his 6 horns, bringing them back to his side where they stacked neatly together, hovering by his hip. Freed from Izuku's cage, the villain lunged desperately at All Might. Texas. Smash! All Might threw the punch. He didn't even make contact with the villain. The sheer aerodynamic pressure generated by the swing of his fist created a localized hurricane within the tunnel. The shockwave tore through the confined space, hitting the sludge villain like a freight train. The liquid body was instantly ripped apart, splashing against the walls, the ceiling, and the floor, completely incapacitated. The wind hit Izuku a microsecond later. It was intense, threatening to blow him off his feet, but Izuku quickly expanded one of his horns into a flat shield, anchoring it to the ground telekinetically, and hiding behind it to brace himself against the gale. When the wind died down, the tunnel was quiet, save for the dripping of sludge. Incredible, Izuku whispered, stepping out from behind his shield. The 6 horns dissipated into fine, sparkling green dust as he cut off his telekinetic connection to them, a sign of respect. He didn't need his weapons out in the presence of the symbol of peace. All Might turned to Izuku, holding up 2 large plastic soda bottles he had apparently procured from a nearby grocery bag. He was moving with lightning speed, scooping up the unconscious bits of sludge and sealing them inside the bottles. Excellent reflexes, young man. All Might boomed, capping the second bottle tight. I apologize for getting you caught up in my villain hunt. The sewers here are quite the labyrinth, but you held your own magnificently. That is a truly spectacular quirk you have. Izuku felt a massive surge of pride swell in his chest. A compliment from All Might was worth more than gold. But unlike the trembling fanboy he might have been if he lacked confidence, Izuku simply bowed deeply. Thank you, All Might, sir. It is an absolute honor to meet you. I've studied all of your fights. Your use of wind pressure to bypass fluid-type villains is a brilliant tactic. All Might blinked, a bit surprised by the boy's composure and analytical nature. Usually, kids his age were screaming or fainting. Ho ho! A tactician, I see. Well, I must be off. I need to get this villain to the police so they can put him in a proper containment cell. Izuku pulled out his burnt orange notebook and a pen. Before you go, sir, could I please get an autograph? It would mean the world to me. Of course. All Might laughed heartily. He took the notebook, moving so fast his hand was a blur, and signed a massive, sprawling signature across a 2-page spread. He handed it back to Izuku with a thumbs up. Study hard, young man. With a quirk like that and a cool head on your shoulders, I expect to see you in the pro ranks one day. Izuku gripped the notebook, a massive smile breaking across his face. I won't let you down, All Might. I'm going to Yue High. Excellent. Plus Ultra. With a mighty flex of his legs, All Might leaped into the air, shooting out of the tunnel and into the sky like a rocket, leaving behind a trail of wind. Izuku watched him go, his heart pounding in his chest. He thinks I can do it. All Might himself thinks I can go pro. He looked down at the signature, tracing the ink with his finger. It was the perfect end to the day. At least, that's what he thought. 10 minutes later, Izuku was walking through the shopping district, still riding the high of meeting his idol. He was halfway through a mental essay on how All Might's muscle density factored into his aerodynamic output when a thunderous boom shook the ground beneath his feet. Smoke billowed into the sky a few blocks away. The acrid smell of burning sulfur and destroyed concrete filled the air. An explosion? Izuku thought, his eyes narrowing. Villain attack? Without a second thought, his legs carried him toward the smoke. Heroics wasn't just a career path for Izuku, it was a compulsion. He needed to see what was happening. He needed to know if he could help. He pushed his way through a growing crowd of onlookers, arriving at the edge of Tatooine's shopping district. The scene before him was absolute chaos. Fires raged out of control, consuming several storefronts. The heat was blistering, forcing the crowd back. Standing in the center of the inferno was a nightmare. The sludge villain. He had somehow escaped. But how? Izuku's mind raced. All Might put him in the bottles. Did he drop them? Did the impact of his jump knock them loose? Izuku felt a pang of guilt. Did I distract him with the autograph? But the guilt was quickly overshadowed by sheer horror as he looked closer. The villain wasn't just rampaging. He had taken a hostage. The sludge had enveloped a teenager, leaving only his face exposed. The teenager was thrashing wildly, his hands unleashing massive, desperate explosions that were only fueling the fires around them. Spiky blonde hair. Crimson eyes burning with fury. Kaken! Izuku gasped. The pro-heroes were already on the scene, but they were doing absolutely nothing. Death Arms, a hero with superhuman strength, was struggling to hold up a falling piece of debris. Kamui Woods was incapacitated, his wooden body unable to approach the roaring flames. Empty Lady was standing at the edge of the street, crying out in frustration that she couldn't expand in a two-lane road without crushing the surrounding buildings. We can't do anything. Death Arms yelled over the roar of the flames. There's no hero here with the right quirk to handle this. We just have to wait for someone with a suitable ability. The kid's suffocating. A police officer yelled. He won't last much longer. Izuku looked at Katsuki. Bakugo's eyes, usually so filled with arrogant fire and unshakable pride, were wide with a silent, desperate plea. He was drowning. He was dying, and the heroes were just watching. Something inside Izuku snapped. Logic, fear, and self-preservation vanished, replaced by an overwhelming, incandescent drive. The very core of what it meant to be a hero ignited within his soul. His body moved before his brain could even process the decision. He dropped his yellow backpack. He bolted past the police tape. Hey! Kid! Stop! You'll get yourself killed! Death Arms roared, reaching out to grab him, but Izuku was already gone. He sprinted straight into the inferno. The heat licked at his skin, but he didn't care. His eyes were locked onto the sludge villain. You again? The villain shrieked, recognizing the green hair. I'll kill you! This kid's quirk is mine. Izuku didn't speak. He didn't waste breath on banter. He reached up with both hands, touching the sides of his head. He didn't just tap. He pulled. His quirk, crowned arsenal, responded to his adrenaline. Crack, 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 crack. In a dazzling display of speed and light, 24 horns burst from his scalp and detached in a matter of seconds. The sheer volume of keratin generation sent a rush of dizziness through his head, but he pushed past it. A brilliant, emerald-green telekinetic aura flared around his body, picking up the 24 ivory constructs. Crowned arsenal, javelin rain. With a ferocious thrust of his arms, Izuku commanded the horns. They shot forward like a barrage of anti-tank missiles. But Izuku wasn't aiming blindly. His hyper-analytical mind calculated the exact trajectory needed to incapacitate the sludge without harming Bakugo. 8 horns elongated into razor-sharp spears, piercing directly into the villain's liquid mass and slamming deep into the asphalt beneath him, effectively pinning the sludge to the ground like a butterfly on a corkboard. The villain shrieked in agony as the dense material disrupted his fluid form. 4 horns shot toward the villain's eyes, hovering mere millimeters from his pupils. Move! Izuku commanded, his voice cold as ice, and I blind you. The villain froze, terrified. But Izuku wasn't done. He needed to get Bakugo out. The remaining 12 horns flew around the hostage. They morphed instantly, their shapes flattening and interlocking perfectly like the scales of a dragon. In less than a second, they formed a tight, impenetrable cage around Bakugo's body, forcing the sludge outward and creating a barrier of solid titanium-dense keratin between Katsuki and the villain. Izuku ran up to the cage, grabbing the edge of the horn barrier with his bare hands. Kaken! Hold on! Bakugo gasped for air as the sludge was forced off his face. He coughed violently, his lungs burning. He looked up, his crimson eyes locking onto Izuku. Deku, what the hell are you doing here? You looked like you were asking for help, Izuku replied, a fierce, unwavering smile on his face. The crowd was stunned into absolute silence. The pro-heroes were frozen, watching a middle school boy execute a flawless, tactical takedown and hostage rescue in a matter of seconds. From the back of the crowd, a gaunt, skeletal man with sunken eyes and baggy clothes watched the scene unfold. It was Toshinori Yagi, the true form of All Might. He had lost his time limit for the day. He had stood there, watching the villain he dropped threaten a child, and he had done nothing. He had told himself he couldn't act. He had let his weakness govern him. But seeing this boy, the very boy he had praised earlier, rush into the flames without a moment's hesitation, it shook Toshinori to his absolute core. He has a powerful quirk, Toshinori thought, clenching his fist over his bleeding stomach. But it isn't the quirk that drove him forward. It was his spirit. The undeniable drive to save someone. He put us all to shame. The sludge villain, realizing he was pinned and losing his hostage, let out a furious scream. I don't care about the eyes. I'll crush you both. He gathered his remaining mass, rearing up to slam down onto Izuku and the horn cage. Izuku braced himself, preparing to shift his horns into a defensive dome overhead. But he didn't have to. A massive hand gripped the villain's liquid body. Izuku looked up. Standing there, steam rolling off his rapidly expanding muscles, was All Might. Blood leaked from the corner of his mouth, but his eyes burned with a righteous fury. I am pathetic, All Might said, his voice low and dangerous. I told you the traits that make a great champion, young man. But I wasn't living up to my own ideals. All Might grabbed Bakugo by the arm, ripping him free from the sludge's weakened grip. At the same time, he pulled his other arm back. Pros are always risking their lives. That is the true test of a hero. Izuku quickly retracted his horns, pulling them out of the way so they wouldn't impede the incoming strike. Detroit. Smash! All Might unleashed a devastating downward hook. The force of the blow didn't just scatter the sludge villain, it altered the air pressure so drastically that a massive updraft was created. A localized tornado ripped through the street, instantly extinguishing the raging fires. As the dust cleared, All Might stood victorious over the unconscious sludge. And then, incredibly, a drop of water hit Izuku's cheek. Then another. The crowd looked up in awe. The sheer force of the Detroit smash had changed the weather, pulling clouds together and causing it to rain. He changed the weather. A civilian whispered. The street erupted into deafening cheers. The aftermath was a blur of flashing police lights and overlapping voices. The pro-heroes, recovering from their shock, immediately swarmed the two boys. While Bakugo was surrounded by medics and heroes praising his resilience and his powerful quirk, Izuku was pulled aside by Kamui Woods and Death Arms. What were you thinking, kid? Death Arms scolded, though his tone lacked true malice. That was incredibly reckless. You could have been killed. Leave the hero work to the professionals. With all due respect, sir, Izuku said firmly, refusing to look down. The professionals were waiting for someone with a suitable quirk. My quirk was suitable. If I had waited, Katsuki would have suffocated. I secured the villain and protected the hostage without causing collateral damage. I know I broke the law regarding public quirk usage, and I'll accept whatever fine comes with that. But I won't apologize for saving a life. Death Arms opened his mouth to yell again, but paused. He looked at the confident, unflinching green eyes of the boy before him. He sighed, rubbing his temples. Kid, you've got a lot of nerve. And yeah, you've got an incredible handle on that quirk of yours. You made us look like fools out there. Just don't make a habit of vigilantism, okay? Get your provisional license first. Yes, sir, Izuku nodded respectfully. Once the police took his statement, Izuku collected his yellow backpack and began the long walk home. The adrenaline was finally wearing off, leaving him exhausted. Generating 24 horns at once took a significant toll on his body's calcium and keratin reserves. He was going to need to drink a gallon of milk when he got home. Hey! Deku! Izuku stopped, turning around under the soft glow of the streetlights. Bakugo was jogging toward him, his hands stuffed in his pockets, a scowl on his face. He stopped a few feet away, panting slightly. The two rivals stared at each other in silence for a long moment. Listen to me, you damn nerd, Bakugo ground out, his voice tight with complex emotions. Pride, anger, and something resembling gratitude warring in his chest. I didn't ask for your help. I didn't need you to save me. I could have taken that sludge freak on my own. You didn't do anything but get in the way. Izuku smiled softly. He knew Katsuki better than anyone. This was his way of saying thank you. His pride wouldn't allow the words to actually leave his mouth. I know, Kaken, Izuku said gently. But you looked like you were in pain. I just moved. Bakugo's eyes widened slightly, then he scowled deeper, looking away. Whatever. Don't think this makes you better than me. I'm still going to crush you at the UA exams. Your stupid horns aren't going to stand a chance against my explosions when I'm actually allowed to let loose. I'm looking forward to it, Izuku replied, his competitive spirit flaring. I won't hold back, Katsuki, Bakugo scoffed, turning on his heel and stomping away into the night. You better not, Deku. Izuku watched him go, a sense of deep satisfaction washing over him. The rivalry was alive and well. He turned back around, ready to finally head home and sleep for 12 hours. I am here! Izuku jumped nearly out of his skin as All Might suddenly burst from a side alley, landing dramatically in front of him in a dynamic pose. All Might? Izuku gasped, instinctively tapping his head and generating 3 defensive horns before realizing who it was. He quickly dismissed them, blushing slightly. Sorry. You startled me. What are you doing here? How did you get away from the press? Ha! A hero must always know how to make a strategic retreat from the paparazzi. All Might boasted. But suddenly, the massive hero coughed up a terrifying amount of blood. His towering, muscular form dissolved in a cloud of thick white steam. Izuku watched in absolute shock as the symbol of peace shrank, his muscles deflating until all that was left was the skeletal, gaunt man who had been watching from the crowd earlier. What? Izuku yelled, taking a step back. You deflated. Are you an imposter? A fake? I assure you, young man, I am the real deal, the gaunt man sighed, wiping blood from his chin. He leaned against the railing of the sidewalk, looking utterly exhausted. The All Might you see on television. That's just a guy sucking in his gut. A bravado I put on to make the public feel safe. Izuku's hyperactive brain went into overdrive. An illusion? A secondary quirk? No, that doesn't make sense. Mass cannot simply disappear. Muscle deterioration? All Might lifted his baggy shirt, revealing a horrific, jagged scar that covered the entire left side of his chest. It looked like a crater, a mass of purple and red tissue that radiated agony. 5 years ago, All Might explained, his voice losing its booming quality, replaced by a somber, heavy tone. An enemy attacked me. My respiratory system was nearly destroyed, and my stomach was completely removed. I've had multiple surgeries, but I can only do hero work for about 3 hours a day now. Izuku's eyes widened in horror. 5 years ago, the toxic chainsaw fight? No, that timeline doesn't match up. Something kept completely out of the public eye. An enemy capable of crippling the invincible All Might? I'm telling you this, Midoriya, because you need to understand the reality of the path you've chosen, All Might continued, his sunken blue eyes locking onto Izuku with intense gravity. Being a hero, it requires sacrifice. It requires standing up and smiling, even when you are terrified. Even when you are broken. All Might pushed himself off the railing, walking slowly toward Izuku. Today, in that alleyway, out of all the pros, out of all the onlookers, you were the only one who moved. A boy who had no license, no obligation, and everything to lose. You stepped into the fire because your body moved before you had time to think. Izuku's breath caught in his throat. He remembered the feeling perfectly. The overwhelming need to act. That is the hallmark of a true hero, All Might said softly. More than a powerful quirk. More than tactical genius. It is the heart of a champion. And you, Izuku Midoriya, you have that heart. Tears pricked the corners of Izuku's eyes. He had been praised his whole life for his quirk, his crowned arsenal. Everyone told him his power was amazing, but nobody had ever praised him for why he wanted to use it. Nobody had ever looked past the titanium horns and seen the boy underneath. You are worthy, All Might said, extending a bony hand. Worthy to inherit my power. Izuku blinked, the tears momentarily halting as confusion set in. Inherit your power? What do you mean? Quirks are genetic. They can't be passed down. That is the truth for 99% of the world, All Might chuckled. But my quirk is a special exception. It is a sacred torch, passed from generation to generation, cultivated, refined, and stockpiled. Its true name is One for All. One. For All. Izuku whispered. The name felt heavy, like it carried the weight of history itself. Yes, All Might nodded. One person cultivates the power, and passes it to another, who cultivates it further. It is the crystallized power of righteous hearts, stockpiled to smash through the darkness, and I have been searching for a successor. Someone with the tactical mind to wield it, a body strong enough to contain it, and above all, a spirit that will never waver. I want you to be that successor, Izuku. Izuku stood frozen beneath the glow of the streetlight. He thought about his life. He thought about the hours he spent practicing his telekinesis, the headaches he pushed through to increase his horn generation limit. He thought about his notebooks, filled with dreams of saving people with a smile. He was already powerful. He was already a prodigy. He had the tools to be a great hero. But to have the power of All Might? To combine the absolute, overwhelming force of One for All with the razor-sharp precision of his crowned arsenal? What happens, Izuku wondered, his mind racing with terrifying, beautiful possibilities, when you give the ultimate power stockpiling quirk to someone who can control 24 indestructible telekinetic weapons? Izuku looked up. The tears were gone, replaced by a fierce, blazing determination that rivaled the fires he had just run through. He didn't hesitate. He didn't stutter. He clenched his fists, locking eyes with the symbol of peace. I accept, Izuku said firmly. I will take your power, All Might. And I will show the world what it can do. All Might smiled, a genuine, warm smile that belonged to Toshinori Yagi, not the number one hero. I knew you would, Toshinori said softly. Now, let the true training begin. The sea breeze that swept across Dagoba Municipal Beach Park used to smell of salt, seaweed, and the fresh promise of the ocean. But for the past decade, it had smelled of rust, decaying food, and forgotten dreams. It was a massive illegal dumping ground, a monument to society's laziness. Piles of refrigerators, crushed cars, broken washing machines, and shattered furniture formed metallic mountains that blocked the view of the horizon. For the next 10 months, this graveyard of trash was to be Izuku Midoriya's crucible. To inherit One for All, your vessel must be adequately prepared. All Might's voice boomed over the crash of the morning waves. The number one hero, in his heavily muscled muscle form, sat atop a rusted pickup truck, wearing a white t-shirt and track pants. He held a thick sheaf of papers in his massive hand. The quirk is the culmination of generations of raw, stockpiled power. If a normal person with an untrained body were to receive it, the sheer force of the energy would blast their limbs off like firecrackers. Standing at the base of the trash pile, Izuku swallowed hard. The mental image of his arms exploding like overstuffed balloons wasn't exactly pleasant. Right. So, I need to build muscle mass. But All Might, sir, my quirk already demands a lot from my body. Izuku tapped his temple, instantly manifesting 3 sleek, ivory horns. With a soft snick snick snick, he detached them and let them hover around him, glowing with his signature emerald telekinetic aura. Generating the keratin bone alloy drains my calcium and protein reserves, and controlling multiple projectiles simultaneously strains my central nervous system. Won't piling intense physical labor on top of that burn me out? All Might suddenly deflated with a hiss of steam, his skeletal true form coughing into a handkerchief. Toshinori Yagi hopped down from the truck, wiping his mouth. An excellent point, young Midoriya. Which is why we aren't just going to train your muscles. We are going to train your mind, your quirk, and your body in perfect, grueling synergy. Behold, Toshinori thrust the sheaf of papers toward Izuku. The aim to pass, American Dream Plan. I've tailored this specifically for you. We will use this beach as your training ground. You will clear every piece of trash off this sand. Izuku took the papers, his green eyes scanning the intricate schedules. It detailed sleep cycles, hypercaloric diets rich in calcium and protein, and rigorous weightlifting routines. But here is the twist, Toshinori added, his sunken blue eyes gleaming. I don't want you just carrying the trash with your hands. I want you to use your crown arsenal to assist you, but you cannot use the horns to carry the load entirely telekinetically. You must bind the trash with your horns and use them as leverage, pulling with your actual physical muscles while maintaining your telekinetic connection. You will fight the resistance of your own mind with the strength of your back. Izuku's eyes widened as he grasped the concept. It was genius. By anchoring a heavy object with his horns and pulling it himself, he would be forcing his physical muscles to bear the weight, while simultaneously forcing his brain to maintain the telekinetic grip under extreme physical duress. It was dual-layered resistance training. It's going to be hell, Izuku muttered, a slow, determined smile creeping onto his face. It will be, Toshinori agreed softly. You have 10 months until the UA entrance exam. You are already a formidable fighter, Midoriya. But to hold one for all, you must become a fortress. Let's begin. The following 10 months were a blur of agonizing pain, immense hunger, and sheer, unbreakable willpower. In the first month, Izuku thought he was going to die. Waking up at 4 a.m., he would jog to the beach, the cold morning air biting at his lungs. He would generate thick, rope-like variations of his horns, a shape he hadn't practiced much, wrap them around a rusted microwave, and drag it across the sand. His hands blistered, his back ached, and his head throbbed with a persistent migraine from the constant telekinetic output. By the third month, the migraines faded. His body was adapting. He was consuming an astronomical amount of food, steaks, gallons of milk, eggs, and protein shakes, to keep up with the dual demand of his keratin generation and his expanding muscle mass. He learned to generate larger, denser horns without feeling dizzy. By the 6th month, Izuku was moving sedans. He would create a harness out of flattened horns, strap it to his chest, pierce the frame of a junked car with other horns to create anchor points, and drag the massive heaps of metal across the beach. His shirts began to fit tighter. The baby fat on his face melted away, replaced by a sharp, defined jawline and the calloused, scarred hands of a warrior. Through it all, his analytical mind never rested. During his breaks, he would sit with Toshinori, discussing battle tactics, quirk theory, and the legacy of One for All. He learned about the previous wielders, about the nature of stockpiled energy, and most importantly, about the responsibility that came with absolute power. Izuku wasn't just building a body, he was forging a heroic philosophy. Then came the morning of the exam. The sun was just beginning to peek over the horizon, casting a brilliant golden glow over Dagoba Beach. Except, it was a beach again. Toshinori Yagi drove up in his truck, stepping out into the cool morning air. He stopped, his eyes widening. The towering mountains of trash were gone. Every tire, every rusted nail, every broken appliance had been cleared away. The pristine white sand stretched out toward the gently lapping waves, reflecting the dawn's light like a mirror. Standing at the edge of the water was Izuku Midoriya. He was shirtless, his back to Toshinori. The physical transformation was nothing short of staggering. Izuku's previously lean frame was now packed with dense, tightly coiled muscle. His shoulders were broad, his core was a washboard of defined abs, and his arms looked capable of crushing stone. But more than the muscle, it was the aura around him. He radiated a quiet, dangerous competence. Floating in a perfect, mesmerizing orbit around Izuku's body were 24 solid, gleaming white horns. They spun in a complex, multi-layered planetary orbit, glowing with a bright emerald light. He was controlling all of them effortlessly, without a single drop of sweat on his brow, while standing perfectly still. He didn't just meet my expectations, Toshinori thought, an immense swell of pride tightening his chest. He shattered them. He is a masterpiece. Midoriya! Toshinori called out. Izuku turned. With a single thought, the 24 horns dissolved into a cloud of sparkling green dust that blew away in the sea breeze. He jogged over, pulling on a white t-shirt that stretched tightly across his chest. I finished, All Might. An hour ahead of schedule, Izuku said, flashing a bright, confident smile. You did more than finish, young man, Toshinori said, stepping forward. He suddenly shifted into his towering muscle form, the imposing figure of All Might blocking out the sun. You cleared the area outside the boundary lines as well. You are truly a vessel worthy of the power. Now, it is time to grant you your reward. All Might reached up, grabbing one of the golden, V-shaped tufts of hair on his head. With a sharp tug, he plucked a single strand of hair. He held it out to Izuku, his booming voice echoing with dramatic weight. This is it, Izuku Midoriya. The culmination of your hard work. To inherit my power. Eat this. Izuku stared at the golden hair. The dramatic tension of the moment shattered instantly. He blinked deadpan. Excuse me? You have to ingest some of my DNA for the quirk to transfer. All Might explained, thrusting the hair closer. It doesn't matter what it is. A hair, a drop of blood, spit, but hair is the most hygienic under the circumstances. Now eat it, hurry. You have to go get ready for the exam. Izuku sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. He supposed it made biological sense, given the vector of transfer, but it was still incredibly anticlimactic. He took the hair, squeezed his eyes shut, and swallowed it dry. He gagged slightly, beating his chest. Ugh. Did it work? I don't feel anything. It will take a few hours for your stomach acids to break it down and for the genetic sequence to merge with yours, All Might explained, giving him a massive thumbs up. By the time the practical exam starts, you should have access to one for all. But remember, Midoriya, do not overdo it. You haven't tested the power yet. Rely on your crowned arsenal, and only use one for all if absolutely necessary. Understood? Izuku nodded, his eyes hardening with determination. Thank you, All Might. For everything. Don't thank me yet, All Might grinned. Go show Yue what you're made of. Plus Ultra. A few hours later, Izuku stood before the towering, H-shaped archway of Yue High School. The sheer scale of the campus was intimidating, designed to make prospective students feel the weight of the institution they were trying to enter. Hundreds of teenagers were funneling through the gates, a vibrant tapestry of quirks and mutations. Izuku adjusted the straps of his yellow backpack, taking a deep breath of the crisp spring air. He felt a strange warmth radiating from the center of his chest, a deep, thrumming pulse that wasn't there before. The quirk, he realized. One for all is settling in. It felt like a dormant volcano, quiet but teeming with unfathomable pressure. Out of my way, Deku. The familiar, gravelly voice came from behind. Izuku didn't flinch. He turned slightly, greeting the scowling face of Katsuki Bakugo. The blonde explosive user looked as fierce as ever, his hands stuffed deep into the pockets of his black uniform trousers. Morning, Kaken, Izuku said pleasantly. Sleep well? Bakugo stopped, his crimson eyes raking over Izuku. Even through the standard middle school uniform, Bakugo could see the physical changes in his rival. Izuku held himself differently. His posture was perfectly straight, his shoulders broad. There was a relaxed, predatory grace to his movements that set Bakugo's teeth on edge. Don't try to make small talk with me, Bakugo snarled, though the usual venom was tempered by a sharp, analytical caution. He knew Izuku was strong. The sludge villain incident had proven that. I don't care how many weights you lifted these past 10 months. Muscles don't mean anything when I blast you into a crater. I'm taking the #1 spot. I expect nothing less, Izuku replied evenly, stepping aside to let Bakugo pass. See you in there, Bakugo scoffed, marching past him without another word. Izuku watched him go, smiling faintly. He turned to continue his walk up the long, paved pathway toward the main building. He was mentally reviewing the mechanics of the entrance exam he had researched when his boot caught the edge of an uneven paving stone. His center of gravity pitched forward. Oops, Izuku thought. He was about to catch himself with a quick telekinetic push, but before he could activate his quirk, he felt a sudden feeling of weightlessness. He was floating horizontally, suspended a few inches above the concrete. Oh. Sorry for using my quirk on you without asking. Izuku rotated his body, looking over his shoulder. Standing a few feet away was a girl with a round, cheerful face, large brown eyes, and permanent pink blush on her cheeks. She had short, bobbed brown hair and was wearing a standard uniform. She pressed her fingertips together, and instantly, gravity returned to Izuku. He landed gracefully on his feet, turning to face her. I just figured it would be bad luck if you fell right before the exam, she beamed, rubbing the back of her neck nervously. I'm Achiko Uraraka. Are you okay? Izuku offered a warm, charming smile. I'm perfectly fine. Thank you, Uraraka. Gravity manipulation? That's a highly versatile quirk. Tactically speaking, negating weight is an incredible advantage for rescue and mobility. Uraraka blinked, a heavy blush dusting her cheeks at the sudden, articulate praise. Oh. Thank you. Wow, you sound really smart. Are you nervous? I'm so nervous my stomach feels like it's doing backflips. A little, Izuku admitted, adjusting his bag. But mostly, I'm just ready to get started. I'm Izuku Midoriya, by the way. Good luck in there, Uraraka. You too, Midoriya. She waved enthusiastically as Izuku headed into the building. The written portion of the exam was a breeze. Izuku's obsessive studying habits and analytical mind made short work of the mathematics, history, and heroic law sections. He finished with 30 minutes to spare, spending the rest of the time sketching structural designs for his horns to optimize aerodynamics. Next came the orientation. The massive auditorium was packed. Izuku sat beside Bakugo in the dim lighting, looking down at the stage. The voice hero, Present Mike, wearing his signature leather jacket and directional speaker neckpiece, was standing behind a podium. Welcome to my live show, everybody. Present Mike screamed, his voice amplified to deafening levels. Can I get a yeah? Silence echoed through the hall. Izuku smiled. Present Mike. His voice can reach deafening decibels, capable of shattering eardrums and destroying physical structures. A purely offensive, long-range quirk. Tough crowd. Present Mike laughed, completely unbothered. All right, let's get down to the nitty-gritty. The practical exam. You'll be participating in a 10-minute mock urban battle. You've all been assigned to specific battle centers. No teaming up with your friends. Izuku glanced at his card. He was in Battle Center B. He looked over at Bakugo's card. Battle Center A. Makes sense, Izuku thought. They separated students from the same middle school so we can't work together or specifically target each other based on prior knowledge. It's a true test of adaptability. Inside the battle centers, Present Mike continued, pointing to a massive screen behind him, you will find 3 types of villain robots. They are worth 1, 2, or 3 points based on their difficulty. Your goal is to use your quirks to rack up as many points as possible. But beware, no anti-hero actions against other students. This is a test of your own merit. Excuse me. Sir. A tall, broad-shouldered boy with blue hair and square glasses stood up in the middle of the auditorium. His posture was ramrod straight, his arm raised like a rigid flagpole. The handout lists 4 types of villains. If this is a misprint, then UA, the top hero academy in the nation, should be ashamed. We are here to receive exemplary guidance. The boy suddenly turned, pointing a stiff, accusatory finger directly at Izuku. And you, with the curly hair. You've been muttering and smiling to yourself this entire time. It's distracting. If you aren't taking this seriously, then leave immediately. The auditorium plunged into an awkward silence. Hundreds of eyes turned to Izuku. Bakugo sneered, ready to watch Izuku cower. But Izuku didn't flinch. He didn't stutter, and he didn't apologize. He simply leaned back in his chair, meeting the blue-haired boy's aggressive gaze with cool, calm emerald eyes. I assure you, I am taking this incredibly seriously, Izuku replied, his voice projecting clearly without needing to shout. I was simply analyzing the point distribution system based on the mechanical structure of the robots shown on the screen. As for the 4th robot, if you had allowed the pro hero to finish his presentation instead of interrupting him to show off your own diligence, we likely would have our answer by now. A collective "oh" rippled through the nearby students. The blue-haired boy blinked, a flush of embarrassment hitting his cheeks. He bowed stiffly. I apologize for my interruption. Please continue, Present Mike. He sat down quickly. Present Mike grinned, pointing a finger gun at Izuku. Thanks for the assist, examinee 7111. And you're exactly right. The 4th robot is worth 0 points. It's an obstacle, a massive gimmick that will go on a rampage in tight spaces. My advice? Avoid it at all costs. That's all from me. Plus ultra. 30 minutes later, the students assigned to Battle Center B stood before a set of colossal steel doors. The mock city behind the walls looked like a genuine slice of Tokyo, complete with skyscrapers, roads, and alleyways. Izuku stood at the front of the pack, doing light stretches. He wore a simple, dark green tracksuit with reinforced knee and elbow pads. The thrumming heat in his chest, the sleeping giant of One for All, was more pronounced now. It felt like a secondary heartbeat. He consciously pushed the feeling down. He wanted to see how far his base quirk had come after 10 months of physical conditioning before he relied on a power he didn't understand. He glanced around. Uraraka was a few yards away, taking deep breaths. The blue-haired boy with glasses, whose name Izuku surmised was Ida from hearing others talk, was adjusting exhaust pipes on his calves. Suddenly, the massive steel doors began to grind open. Before the gap was even wide enough for a car, Izuku moved. He didn't wait for a starting gun. He broke into a dead sprint, slipping through the opening doors with the speed of a gazelle. "Hey! What are you doing?" Ida yelled, stepping forward. "The exam hasn't started. You're cheating. There are no countdowns in real battles." President Mick's voice suddenly blared from hidden speakers across the city. "Run, run, run! The green-haired kid has the right idea." Panic erupted as the rest of the examinees scrambled to follow, but Izuku was already a block away. "Focus," Izuku told himself, his mind shifting into a state of hyper-analytical combat flow. "The robots are mechanical. Blunt force will require massive exertion. Slashing is good, but piercing is optimal. Target the sensors, the joints, and the power cores." As he rounded a corner onto a main avenue, 3 robots rolled out of an alleyway to block his path. 2 sleek, single-wheeled one-pointers, and a bulky, heavily armored 2-pointer resembling a mechanical scorpion. Target acquired, the 2-pointer droned in a robotic voice, raising 2 massive pincers. Izuku didn't slow his sprint. He reached up with both hands, tapping his temples in a rapid rhythm. Tap 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 tap. 6 horns sprouted and detached instantly, hovering in the air behind him. Izuku didn't just throw them. He mentally shaped them. 4 of the horns elongated into thin, viciously sharp javelins. The remaining 2 widened and flattened, morphing into curved, aerodynamic boards. With a leap, Izuku threw the 2 flat horns under his feet. His telekinetic grip locked onto them, creating a solid platform. Relying on his intense core strength, he surfed on the hovering blades, lifting himself 2 feet off the ground and accelerating down the avenue without breaking stride. The 2-pointer lunged, snapping its pincers at where Izuku had just been. But Izuku was already gliding past it. As he passed, he mentally flicked his wrist. The 4 floating javelins shot forward with the speed of bullets. Crank! Crunch! Squeal! Precision strikes. 2 javelins pierced the red optical sensors of the 1-pointers, plunging deep into their CPU housings and short-circuiting them instantly. The other 2 javelins didn't aim for the heavily armored chassis of the 2-pointer. Instead, they dove into the narrow, unarmored gaps of its leg joints, severing the hydraulic cables. The 3 robots crashed to the ground in a tangle of sparks and groaning metal. 4 points, Izuku tallied mentally, not even looking back. He recalled the javelins, letting them orbit his floating surfboard as he soared down the street. High above, in a darkened observation room, the faculty of UA High watched the hundreds of monitors displaying the exam. Well, a woman with a sultry voice and a dominatrix-style hero costume hummed. Midnight leaned over the console, her eyes locked on a specific screen. "Look at examinee 7111. He's practically dancing out there. His spatial awareness is off the charts," noted Snipe, the Kalba-themed hero, adjusting his mask. "He's commanding multiple high-density projectiles with lethal accuracy, all while maintaining a separate telekinetic construct for mobility. That requires a central nervous system like a supercomputer. He's fast, efficient, and ruthless to the machines," an exhausted voice grumbled from the corner. Eraserhead, Shota Aizawa, watched the green-haired boy glide over a group of 3-pointers, dropping a barrage of heavy, hammer-shaped horns that crushed their metal skulls. "He's racked up 45 points in 3 minutes. He's not just relying on the quirk either. Look at his posture on that hovering platform. His physical balance and core strength are elite." Tashinori Yagi stood at the back of the room, bursting with pride. "Show them, young Midoriya. Show them the king's arsenal." Back in the battle center, Izuku was an untouchable force of nature. He was a flying fortress. He had generated 12 horns total now. two served as his aerial surfboard, allowing him to bypass the crowded streets and navigate vertically, launching himself off walls and gliding over alleyways. The other 10 formed a defensive ring of floating blades around him. Whenever a robot appeared, Izuku didn't stop to fight it. He simply glided past, sending 2 or 3 horns shooting out like guided missiles to pierce their weak spots before recalling them to his orbit. 57, 60, 63 points, Izuku muttered, banking sharply around a skyscraper to avoid a massive laser blast from a 3-pointer. He retaliated by sending a single horn spinning like a buzzsaw, slicing clean through the robot's laser cannon barrel. Below him, the other examinees were struggling. Ida was kicking robots with immense power, but he was grounded and prone to being surrounded. Aoyama, a boy with a naval laser, was blasting robots but severely limiting his mobility due to stomach cramps. Uraraka was touching robots to make them float, then dropping them, a highly effective but stamina-draining method. I have enough points to pass, Izuku calculated, landing gracefully on the roof of a 3-story building and recalling his horns. He let them dissolve to conserve his keratin reserves. The cutoff for the hero course is usually around 40 points. I should conserve my energy and look out for anyone who might need help. Suddenly, the ground beneath the entire mock city shuddered violently. It wasn't a small tremor. It felt like an earthquake. Dust rained down from the buildings. Car alarms blared in the distance. A massive shadow fell over the avenue. Izuku looked up, his breath catching in his throat. Emerging from a wide intersection 2 blocks away was a mechanical monstrosity. It was as tall as a skyscraper, its massive, tank-like treads crushing buildings as it moved. Its cyclopean red eye glowed with an ominous, hateful light. The 0-pointer. Avoided at all costs, President Mike had said. And seeing the sheer scale of the behemoth, the advice made perfect sense. It wasn't an enemy to be fought. It was a natural disaster to be survived. Panic erupted on the streets below. Examinees screamed, abandoning their fights and running in the opposite direction. Ida sprinted past, his engine legs firing at max capacity. Aoyama fired a laser at the sky in terror before fleeing. Izuku immediately moved to the edge of the roof, preparing to generate a surfboard and retreat. There was no strategic value in fighting an obstacle worth 0 points. It was a waste of resources. Ow! Please, my leg. The voice was faint, barely cutting through the grinding gears of the 0-pointer, but Izuku's hyper-attentive ears caught it. He stopped. He looked down at the street below. The 0-pointer had smashed through a building, sending massive chunks of concrete raining down onto the avenue. Trapped under a slab of rubble, her leg pinned and bleeding, was Uraraka. She was pushing against the concrete with her hands, trying to use her quirk, but she was exhausted. And the 0-pointer was raising its massive, building-sized fist, preparing to crush the entire street, and her with it, into dust. She's going to die, Izuku realized, his blood running cold. There was no time to think. No time to calculate trajectories or keratin reserves. Izuku threw himself off the roof of the building. He didn't generate a surfboard to glide. He let himself fall, hitting the asphalt below in a heavy crouch, the impact absorbed by his newly developed musculature. He sprinted toward Uraraka, placing himself directly between her and the looming shadow of the falling mechanical fist. Midoriya? Uraraka gasped, tears streaming down her dirty face. Run! It's too big. Izuku stared up at the descending fist of steel. His mind raced. My base quirk isn't enough. Even if I generate 24 horns and group them together, the sheer kinetic mass of that fist will crush my telekinetic barrier and snap my neck through the feedback. I need more power. I need absolute, overwhelming force. He clenched his fists at his sides. He closed his eyes for a fraction of a second, diving deep into his own body. He found that thrumming, burning core of heat sitting in his chest. The dormant volcano, one for all. All Might said to be careful, Izuku whispered to himself. He said an untrained body would blow apart. Izuku opened his eyes. They were no longer just green, they were glowing with a terrifying, incandescent light. So I just won't use 100%. Izuku's analytical mind forced a limit on the raw power, visualizing the energy as a valve. I've built a fortress. I can handle a fraction. Just 5%. Let the power flow through the entire fortress, not just one limb, one for all. Full cowling. 5%, KRAKTHOM. A shockwave of air exploded outward from Izuku's body, kicking up dust and debris. Bright, crackling tendrils of emerald green lightning erupted from his skin, dancing wildly across his muscles. The power was intoxicating. It felt as if his blood had turned to liquid fire, enhancing his perception, his strength, and his reflexes to godlike levels. But Izuku wasn't a brawler. He was a sniper. He was a tactician. He didn't want to punch the robot. He wanted to shoot it. Izuku tapped his temple once. Instead of a small, sleek horn, the keratin generation went into hyperdrive, fueled by the raw energy of One for All. A massive, thick pillar of ivory bone erupted from his head. Izuku reached up, grabbing it with both hands, and ripped it free with a deafening crack. The horn was over 2 meters long, thick as a tree trunk, and spiraled with sharp, jagged ridges. It looked less like a horn and more like a mythical lance forged to kill gods. But the true miracle happened when Izuku applied his telekinesis. As his emerald aura enveloped the massive horn, the green lightning of One for All jumped from his skin and arced into the hovering weapon. The bone keratin alloy instantly darkened, hardening into a shimmering, indestructible black-green material. It hummed with a terrifying frequency, vibrating the air itself. The energy transfers, Izuku realized, a wild, fierce grin breaking across his face. One for All doesn't just boost my physical body. It supercharges my telekinetic output and reinforces the durability of my constructs. The zero-pointer's fist was 50 feet away. 40 feet. 30. Izuku widened his stance, bringing his arms back. He positioned the massive, lightning-infused horn directly in front of him, aiming the point upward at the center of the robot's chest. "Hey, ugly!" Izuku shouted, the green lightning flaring intensely around his eyes. He didn't throw it with his arms. He didn't need to. He unleashed the full, 5% boosted force of his telekinetic mind. Crowned arsenal. With a sound like a thunderclap, the horn vanished. Railgun. A massive ring of displaced air exploded from where the horn had hovered, shattering the windows of every remaining building on the block. The black-green projectile tore through the sky, a streak of emerald lightning moving at hypersonic speeds. It hit the zero-pointer's descending fist. The titanium alloy armor of the giant robot didn't even slow it down. The massive horn pierced straight through the center of the fist, traveled up the interior of the mechanical arm, and breached the main chassis. Boom! The impact was so devastating that the sheer kinetic transfer halted the zero-pointer's forward momentum entirely. The massive machine froze. Then, starting from the chest cavity where the horn had exited out the back, a series of catastrophic explosions ripped through the robot. Flames erupted from its joints. Its red eye flickered and died. Slowly, agonizingly, the skyscraper-sized behemoth tilted backward, crashing into the mock city behind it with a deafening, earth-shaking roar. Silence descended upon Battle Center B. The dust settled, revealing Izuku standing perfectly still, his arm outstretched. The green lightning faded from his skin, his hair falling back down over his eyes. He exhaled a long, shaky breath. He felt a deep ache in his muscles and a sharp spike of a migraine behind his eyes from the telekinetic strain, but his limbs were intact. He hadn't broken a single bone. He had successfully bottlenecked One for All, channeled it into his quirk, and annihilated the ultimate obstacle with a single shot. It works, Izuku thought, his heart pounding with euphoric realization. I'm not just a brawler. I'm a mobile artillery unit. A soft gasp broke him from his thoughts. He turned around. Uraraka was staring at him, her jaw practically on the ground. The piece of rubble pinning her leg had been blown completely away by the shockwave of his attack. Around them, other examinees were slowly emerging from the alleyways, their faces pale, staring at the smoldering ruins of the zero-pointer, and then at the green-haired boy who had felled it. Time's up. Present Mick's voice blared, signaling the end of the exam. Izuku immediately dropped his aggressive stance. He jogged over to Uraraka, his face softening with concern. He knelt beside her, inspecting her leg. Are you all right? Nothing's broken, is it? I think it's just a sprain, Uraraka stammered, still looking at him like he was a god who had just descended from the heavens. You You destroyed that thing. With one shot. What are you? Izuku chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck nervously. Just, well prepared, I guess. Very well prepared indeed. A small, elderly woman in a nurse's outfit suddenly appeared, walking with a cane that looked like a syringe. It was Recovery Girl, UA's premier healer. She handed Izuku a few gummy bears before kneeling next to Uraraka. With a quick kiss to the girl's forehead, Uraraka's leg glowed, the swelling vanishing instantly. Excellent work saving your fellow examinee, young man, Recovery Girl praised, looking up at Izuku. Though using a quirk of that magnitude, you're lucky you didn't tear your own nervous system apart. You have incredible control for someone your age. Thank you, ma'am. Izuku bowed respectfully. As Izuku walked toward the exit of the battle center, the crowd of examinees parted for him instinctively. Whispers followed him like a physical wake. Did you see that? He didn't even punch it. He just shot it. He's a monster. He's definitely getting first place. In the observation room, silence reigned. Even the stoic Eraserhead looked mildly impressed, his unblinking eyes staring at the monitor that displayed Izuku's retreating back. A telekinetic generation quirk, Aizawa muttered. But that final attack, that wasn't just generation. That was pure, localized kinetic annihilation. He manipulated the density and velocity to an absurd degree. Toshinori Yagi turned away from the monitors, a massive, uncontainable smile stretching across his gaunt face. He slipped out of the room quietly. You've done it, Izuku, Toshinori thought, walking down the dark hallway of the school. You didn't just inherit my power. You evolved it. You've forged the ultimate weapon. As Izuku passed through the massive gates of UA to head home, the afternoon sun cast a long shadow behind him. He looked down at his calloused hands. He could still feel the phantom crackle of green lightning dancing across his fingertips. He had walked into this exam as a prodigy with a strong quirk. He was walking out as a king who had finally found his crown. The world of heroes was about to change forever. And Izuku Midoriya was going to lead the charge. The holographic projection had played on a loop in Izuku's mind for the past week. It had come in a small, unassuming metallic disc, delivered via standard mail. But the moment Izuku had pressed the activation button, the projection of All Might had filled his bedroom, wearing a garish yellow suit and a beaming smile. You didn't just pass, young Midoriya. You shattered expectations. The holographic symbol of peace had boomed. 63 villain points. An incredible showing of combat prowess and tactical efficiency. But a hero's true worth isn't measured by destruction. It's measured by salvation. For saving examinee Uraraka, a secret panel of judges awarded you 60 rescue points. A total of 123 points. You didn't just pass, my boy. You took first place with the highest score in UA history. Izuku stood in front of his full-length mirror, adjusting the collar of his UA high school uniform. The dark gray blazer, white shirt, and red tie felt like armor. He looked at his reflection, noting the broadness of his shoulders and the sharp, focused glint in his emerald eyes. He reached up, lightly tracing the spot on his temple where his horns manifested. He had done it. He had taken the first step. The power of One for All thrummed quietly in his chest, a warm, dormant hearth fire that he now knew how to stoke. The entrance exam had proven that his theory was correct. One for All didn't just enhance his physical body. It supercharged the telekinetic and structural properties of his crowned arsenal. Izuku! You're going to be late. His mother's voice called from the kitchen. Coming, Mom! Izuku grabbed his yellow backpack, slinging it over his shoulder. He walked into the kitchen, where Inko Midoriya was frantically packing a bento box, her eyes brimming with happy tears. Oh, my baby, she sniffled, wiping her eyes with a tissue as she handed him the lunchbox. You look so handsome. A real UA student. I'm so proud of you. Your father would be so proud. Izuku smiled warmly, pulling his mother into a tight hug. Thanks, Mom. I couldn't have done it without your support. Just promise me you'll be careful, Inko said, her maternal worry overriding her joy. Your quirk is so strong, Izuku. But there are dangerous people out there. And I saw the news about the entrance exam. The crater that 0-pointer left. You have to promise you won't push yourself too hard. I promise, Izuku said, his voice steady and reassuring. I know my limits. I'm just going to learn how to push them safely. With a final wave, Izuku stepped out of the apartment and into the crisp morning air. The commute to UA High School was a familiar one by now, but walking the path in the official uniform changed everything. Civilians cast respectful, admiring glances his way. The UA emblem was a symbol of elite status, a mark of the future protectors of society. When Izuku finally arrived at the massive, glass and steel complex of UA, he navigated the sprawling, labyrinthine hallways with purposeful strides. He was looking for Class 1A. He finally stopped in front of a door that looked comically oversized. It was easily 20 feet tall, marked with a massive red 1A. Accessibility for students with gigantification or mutation quirks, Izuku analyzed instantly. Logical. UA leaves nothing to chance. He reached out and slid the massive door open. Remove your foot from that desk immediately. It is a profound disrespect to your classmates, and the great alumni who have sat there before you. Ha! What are you, a rulebook on legs? What middle school did you go to, you four-eyed extra? Izuku let out a soft sigh. Some things never changed. Standing at the back of the classroom, his feet propped arrogantly on his desk, was Katsuki Bakugo. Standing in front of him, chopping the air with rigid, robotic arm motions, was the tall, blue-haired boy from the entrance exam orientation, Tenya Ida. The moment the doors slid shut behind Izuku, the classroom fell silent. Ida turned, his eyes widening behind his rectangular glasses. He immediately abandoned Bakugo and marched straight toward Izuku. He stopped a few feet away and bowed at a perfect 90-degree angle. I am Tenya Ida from Semi-Private Academy. Ida announced loudly. I must apologize to you. During the orientation, I misjudged you completely. I thought you were a distracting nuisance, but you were the only one among us who realized the true nature of the practical exam. You deduced the hidden rescue points and acted with the poise of a true hero. I concede. You are the superior student. Izuku blinked, slightly taken aback by the sheer intensity of the boy. He quickly waved a hand. Please, there's no need to bow, Ida. I'm Izuku Midoriya. And I didn't deduce the rescue points, honestly. I just saw someone in danger and moved. It was instinct, not calculation. A true hero's instinct. Ida praised, adjusting his glasses. Magnificent, TCH. Don't let his fake modesty fool you, glasses, Bakugo sneered from the back, a scowl etched deep into his features. His crimson eyes locked onto Izuku. He's a calculating snake. But it doesn't matter how many points you got in a stupid mock battle, Deku. Real combat is different. I'm still going to crush you. Izuku offered Bakugo a calm, unbothered smile. Good morning to you too, Kaken. Oh. It's you! The flying boy. Izuku turned to see Achiko Uraraka bounding into the classroom, her face lighting up with recognition. I was hoping we'd be in the same class. I wanted to thank you properly for saving me. That punch, that shot you fired, was amazing. You were like whoosh and the robot was like kaboom. As Uraraka enthusiastically pantomimed the destruction of the zero-pointer, Izuku's keen ears caught the subtle sound of fabric dragging across the floor out in the hallway. If you're just here to make friends, then you can pack up your things and leave. The gruff, exhausted voice cut through the chatter like a frozen blade. The students froze, turning to look at the doorway. Lying on the floor in a bright yellow sleeping bag, resembling a massive, disgruntled caterpillar, was a man. He unzipped the bag and stood up, revealing a tall, lanky figure dressed in a baggy black jumpsuit. A gray scarf wrapped heavily around his neck, and his face was framed by messy, unkempt black hair that looked like it hadn't been brushed in a decade. His eyes were bloodshot, radiating a profound sense of lethargy. Shota Aizawa, Izuku's mind instantly supplied, a file pulling up in his mental encyclopedias. Pro hero, Eraserhead. An underground hero. Quirk, Erasure. He can nullify the quirk of anyone he looks at, barring heteromorphic mutation types. He relies on highly advanced close-quarters combat and a capture weapon. He shuns the media. Aizawa pulled a juice pouch from his pocket and took a loud slurp. It took you lot 8 seconds to quiet down. Time is a limited resource. You kids aren't rational enough. He stepped up to the podium, his tired eyes sweeping over the class. When his gaze landed on Izuku, it lingered for a fraction of a second. Izuku felt a sudden chill, a primal instinct warning him that this man was incredibly dangerous. "I'm your homeroom teacher, Shota Aizawa." "Nice to meet you," he drawled, sounding anything but pleased. Before anyone could process the fact that this hobo-looking man was a teacher at the most prestigious school in the country, Aizawa reached into his sleeping bag and pulled out a stack of blue tracksuits. "Put these on and head out to the training field," Aizawa ordered. "We're doing a quirk assessment test." 10 minutes later, Class 1A stood on the expansive, sunlit pea grounds of UA High. "A quirk assessment test?" The class echoed in shock. "But what about the entrance ceremony? Or the orientation?" Uraraka asked, holding her hands up in confusion. "If you're going to become a hero, you don't have time for leisurely events," Aizawa replied flatly, turning his back to them. UA's selling point is how unrestricted its traditions are. That's also how the teachers run their classes. You kids have been doing standard fitness tests since junior high, right? 50-meter dash, grip strength, standing long jump, ball throw. All done without quirks. The country still uses averages taken from results devoid of quirks. It's irrational. The Ministry of Education is procrastinating. Aizawa turned his head, his dark eyes locking onto Bakugo. "Bakugo, you finished first in the practical exam among the normal applicants. What was your best result for the softball throw in junior high?" Bakugo stepped forward, cracking his knuckles. 67 meters. "Try doing it with your quirk," Aizawa instructed, tossing a white softball to the explosive blonde. "Stay inside the circle. Do whatever you want, just don't leave the ring." Bakugo caught the ball, a feral grin stretching across his face. He rolled his shoulders, stepping into the center of the throwing circle. Izuku watched closely. He knew exactly what Katsuki was going to do. "Die!" Bakugo roared. He reeled his arm back, and as he threw the ball forward, he ignited a massive explosion from his palm. The concussive force propelled the ball out of his hand like a cannonball, leaving a trail of black smoke in the sky. Aizawa held up a small electronic device. It beeped. He turned the screen toward the class. 705.2 meters. "Know your own maximum first," Aizawa said, his voice echoing over the stunned silence of the students. "That is the most rational way to form the foundation of a hero." 700 meters? That's awesome. An electric blonde boy named Kaminari cheered. "We can use our quirks as much as we want? This looks like fun." A pink-skinned girl named Ishido laughed. Aizawa's eyes darkened. The air temperature seemed to plummet. "Fun?" Aizawa repeated, his voice dangerously low. "You have 3 years to become heroes. Will you have an attitude like that the whole time?" "All right. New rule. Whoever comes in last place in all 8 tests will be judged to have no potential, and will be punished with expulsion." The class erupted in panic. "Expulsion? But it's the first day!" Uraraka cried out, stepping forward. "Even if it wasn't the first day, that isn't fair. Natural disasters, massive accidents, egomaniacal villains," Aizawa listed, brushing his messy hair out of his eyes. "Calamities whose time and place cannot be predicted. Japan is covered in unfairness. Heroes are the ones who reverse those situations. If you wanted to go talk to your friends at a diner, too bad. For the next 3 years, Yui will do all it can to give you one hardship after another. Go beyond. Plus ultra. Overcome it with all you have." Izuku didn't panic. He stood perfectly still, his mind dissecting the situation with surgical precision. Expulsion on the first day is entirely within his legal rights as a UA instructor, Izuku reasoned silently. However, from a pedagogical standpoint, expelling a student immediately wastes the resources spent recruiting them. He's using fear as a catalyst. It's a logical ruse designed to force us past our mental limiters. He wants to see how we perform under the absolute pressure of failure. Izuku felt a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Challenge accepted." "All right," Aizawa said, pulling a stopwatch from his pocket. "Demonstration's over. The real thing starts now. Test 1, 50-meter dash." The students lined up in pairs at the starting line of the track. Izuku found himself paired against a boy with a tail, Mashireo Ojiro. Ojiro took a standard sprinter stance, his thick, muscular tail coiling slightly behind him like a spring. Izuku didn't crouch. He stood perfectly straight, looking down the 50-meter lane. Running is inefficient, Izuku thought. The goal is simply to cross the finish line as fast as possible. My physical muscles are strong, but my quirk is faster. Izuku reached up and tapped the sides of his head twice. Tap tap. With a familiar snick, two long, sleek horns detached from his scalp. Izuku didn't throw them. Instead, he commanded them to hover horizontally on either side of his waist. He reached out and grabbed the smooth, bone-white handles of the horns tightly in his fists. Readied. The robotic voice of the starting machine droned. Izuku focused his telekinetic aura. He enveloped the two horns in a blinding emerald light, locking them into his mental grip. Go! Ojiro pushed off the blocks, his tail whipping to propel him forward with impressive speed. Izuku didn't take a single step. He simply imagined the two horns in his hands shooting forward at maximum velocity. Boom! The telekinetic force was instantaneous. Because Izuku was holding onto the horns, and his grip strength was fortified by his 10 months of hellish physical training, he was yanked forward with the violence of a jet taking off. His feet literally lifted off the ground. He skimmed across the dirt track, suspended in the air, pulled purely by the sheer, overwhelming thrust of his telekinetic constructs. He crossed the finish line in a blur of green light and a cloud of dust. 1.85 seconds, the machine announced. Ojiro crossed the line a few moments later, panting, staring at Izuku in absolute disbelief. Wait, did you just fly? Izuku let go of the horns, letting them dissolve into green dust. He landed smoothly on his feet, dusting off his tracksuit. Technically, I just used my quirk as forward-facing thrusters. It bypasses the friction of running. From the sidelines, Aizawa watched Izuku through half-lidded eyes. He scribbled a note on his clipboard. Midoriya Izuku. Quirk, Crowned Arsenal. High spatial awareness. Creative application. He recognized that the prompt didn't mandate foot-to-ground contact. He's thinking outside the box. When Ida ran, he used his engine legs to cross in 3.04 seconds. Bakugo used his explosions to propel himself through the air, crossing in 4.13 seconds. Bakugo glared at Izuku's time on the scoreboard, a vein popping in his forehead. Test 2, Grip Strength. The class moved to a set of mechanical dynamometers. A tall, multi-armed boy named Mizo Shoji squeezed the device, producing a massive score of 540 kilograms. The class marveled at his raw physical strength. Izuku stepped up to a machine. He held the dynamometer in his hand. He could probably score around 80 or 90 kilograms with his physical strength alone, but this was a quirk assessment. Izuku generated a single horn. He held it in his left hand, examining the shape. With a mental command, the keratin began to shift and mold like clay. The base of the horn widened, splitting into two thick, interlocking jaws, resembling a massive, heavy-duty mechanical C-clamp. Izuku placed the dynamometer between the jaws of the horn construct. He stepped back, letting the construct hover in the air. He narrowed his eyes, flexing his telekinetic will. The emerald aura flared around the horn clamp. Crush! The jaws of the horn slammed shut. The sound of metal groaning and gears snapping echoed across the field. The digital screen on the dynamometer wildly cycled through numbers before short-circuiting, permanently freezing at its maximum output. 999.9 kilograms. Izuku dissolved the horn, catching the mangled piece of testing equipment before it hit the ground. He held it up to Aizawa apologetically. Sorry, sensei. I think I broke it. Aizawa sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. I'll deduct it from your tuition. Next. He didn't even use his physical grip, Aizawa thought, his eyes narrowing slightly. He created an external tool composed of high-density material, and applied a localized telekinetic crush. The force required to bend that much steel. His mental output is terrifying. Test 3-4. Standing long jump and repeated side steps. The test continued, becoming a showcase of Izuku's terrifying versatility. For the standing long jump, Izuku simply tapped his head, generated a wide, flat horn, and threw it under his feet. He stepped onto the hovering surfboard, flashed a peace sign to the class, and calmly glided over the entire sandpit, landing effortlessly on the other side. For the repeated side steps, a test designed to measure lateral agility. Izuku showed off his multitasking. He generated 2 long poles of keratin, planting them deep into the dirt on either side of the testing zone. He grabbed onto the poles, using them as rigid anchors to violently swing his body back and forth, moving so fast he became a green blur. By the time the class reached the 5th test, a collective realization had settled over the students. Todoroki Shoto, a boy with dual-colored hair who had been quietly excelling in every test using his eyes, watched Izuku with cold, calculating eyes. Midoriya Izuku. His quirk is essentially creation, telekinesis, and weapon mastery rolled into one. He hasn't broken a sweat. Bakugo was seething. Little explosions popped involuntarily from his palms. Every time he scored high, Izuku did something absurd to eclipse him. He's mocking me, Bakugo thought, his visions swimming with rage. He's holding back. I haven't seen the green lightning yet. He's treating this like a game. Test 5, the softball pitch. The students gathered back around the throwing circle. Uraraka stepped into the ring. She picked up the softball, her pinkies extended. She wound up and threw the ball with a surprisingly good form. The moment the ball left her hand, she tapped it with all 5 fingers. The ball shot up into the sky, completely unbound by gravity, shrinking into a tiny speck until it disappeared into the blue horizon. Aizawa showed the class his device. The screen displayed a sideways figure 8. Infinity. Infinity? Kaminari screamed. That's insane. How do you beat infinity? You don't beat it, Izuku muttered to himself, stepping forward as Aizawa called his name. You just have to match the statement it makes. Izuku stepped into the white chalk circle. He held the standard white softball in his hand, feeling the stitched leather. The atmosphere in the class shifted. Every eye was glued to him. After his previous performances, everyone was expecting a spectacle. Aizawa unwrapped a portion of his capture scarf, his dark eyes locked intensely onto Izuku. This is the real test, Midoriya. During the entrance exam, you destroyed a 0-pointer with a projectile that broke the sound barrier. The sheer kinetic force of that attack was catastrophic. If you tried to replicate that here without a solid target to absorb the impact, the resulting shockwave could damage the surrounding students, or the campus. Show me you know how to control that power. Izuku looked up at the sky. It was clear and blue, scattered with a few wispy clouds. I need a high score, Izuku thought, his mind entering its hyper-analytical combat state. But Uraraka essentially won this event by removing a fundamental law of physics. I can't remove gravity. I have to overcome it with sheer velocity. But Aizawa-sensei is watching closely. If I use a standard throw, even enhanced with my quirk, I might only hit a few kilometers due to air resistance burning up the ball. I need a delivery system. Izuku reached up to his temple. Tap. Instead of a standard combat horn, Izuku initiated a complex, highly specific generation. A massive, hollow cylinder of bone keratin extruded from his scalp. He pulled it free. It was about a foot long and perfectly hollowed out on the inside, like the barrel of a cannon. Izuku placed the softball inside the hollow chamber of the horn. He commanded the keratin to shrink slightly, sealing the ball tightly inside the dense, heat-resistant alloy. What's he doing? Mina Ashido whispered. Is he making a shell? Izuku held the sealed horn in his right hand. He aimed it straight up into the sky, positioning it like an artillery mortar. If I launch this with pure telekinesis, the air friction at hypersonic speeds will ignite the air around it, Izuku calculated. The shockwave will be massive. I need to contain the blast. Izuku closed his eyes. He reached into his chest, finding the dormant volcano. One for all. Full calling. 5%. Izuku's eyes snapped open, glowing with terrifying emerald light. Bright, crackling green lightning erupted from his body, whipping around his limbs. The air pressure in the training field suddenly spiked, a heavy, oppressive wave of energy washing over the students. Bakugo's breath hitched. There it is. The lightning. Aizawa's eyes widened. His hand shot toward his goggles, ready to activate erasure. What is that energy? That's not a telekinetic aura. That's a pure power stockpiler. He has a multifaceted quirk? Izuku let go of the horn. It hovered perfectly still in the air, pointing at the heavens. The green lightning of One for All immediately abandoned Izuku's body, arcing violently into the keratin shell. The bone turned a deep, shimmering black-green, humming with absolute, catastrophic power. Izuku widened his stance, anchoring his feet into the dirt. He pointed his right hand at the hovering projectile, his index finger extended. He didn't just push it. He mentally visualized a railgun mechanism, magnetic acceleration condensed into a localized point of telekinetic space. Crowned Arsenal. Izuku murmured, his voice calm amidst the crackling lightning. Orbital cannon. He flicked his finger upward. KRAKTHOM. The sound was deafening, like a thunderbolt striking the earth right next to them. But the shockwave didn't expand outward. Izuku had precisely focused the telekinetic vector to only push up. A massive ring of displaced air shattered above Izuku, violently whipping the clothes and hair of everyone nearby. The black-green projectile didn't fly. It simply vanished. It was there 1 microsecond, and the next, there was nothing but a streak of emerald light tearing through the atmosphere, leaving a perfect, circular hole punched cleanly through a cloud high above. Silence fell over the field, broken only by the ringing in the students' ears. Izuku lowered his arm, taking a deep breath. The green lightning faded, returning to the dormant state within his chest. He felt a sharp pang in his temples. The mental calculation required to focus the blast upward without collateral damage was immense. But he pushed the pain aside. Aizawa stood frozen. He looked down at his tracking device. The machine was beeping frantically. The numbers were climbing so fast they were a blur. The GPS tracker inside the ball was transmitting data as it broke through the troposphere, the stratosphere, the mesosphere. The keratin shell, enhanced by One for All, was protecting the ball from burning up upon re-entry because it wasn't re-entering. It had achieved escape velocity. Finally, the tracking signal cut out entirely. The device beeped a final time, freezing on its last recorded distance before losing the satellite connection. Aizawa slowly turned the screen toward the class. 12,742.0 kilometers. 12,000 kilometers? Mineta squeaked, his eyes bugging out of his head. That's the diameter of the Earth. He literally shot it into space. He created a localized sabo round, Momo Yayorozu whispered, her dark eyes wide with analytical awe. He encased the fragile object in a heat-resistant shell and applied a linear kinetic force so powerful it bypassed the planet's gravitational pull. That's not just a quirk. That's a weapon of mass destruction. Izuku turned to Aizawa, offering a polite, slightly apologetic smile. I figured applying a protective casing was the most rational way to prevent the ball from disintegrating. Was the execution acceptable, sensei? Aizawa stared at the smiling boy. For the first time in his teaching career, Shota Aizawa felt a genuine drop of sweat roll down his neck. He had expected the kid to blow his arm off, or at least cause a shockwave that required intervention. Instead, Midoriya had demonstrated godlike power with the surgical precision of a scalpel. Acceptable, Aizawa said dryly, putting the device away. DKU. The roar of absolute, unhinged fury shattered the moment. Izuku didn't even turn his head. He had felt the murderous intent a second before the shout. Katsuki Bakugo was launching himself through the air, explosions blasting from his palms to accelerate his charge. His eyes were wide with a mixture of betrayal and blinding rage. What the hell was that? Bakugo screamed, reaching out to blast Izuku's face point blank. You've been hiding that shit from me for 10 years? You think you can mock me? Izuku's reaction was terrifyingly casual. He didn't dodge. He didn't blink. He just tapped his temple twice. 2 horns shot out. They didn't aim for Bakugo's body. They shot past him, hooking around the thick metal gauntlets of Bakugo's hero costume, pulling them taut. With a flick of his wrist, Izuku slammed the horns into the ground on either side of himself, pinning Bakugo's arms down and forcing the explosive boy to crash face first into the dirt, mere inches from Izuku's shoes. Bakugo thrashed wildly, trying to ignite sparks, but Izuku had pulled the gauntlets at an angle that locked Bakugo's wrists, preventing him from aiming his palms at anything but the sky. Let me go, you damn nerd! Bakugo roared, spitting dirt. I'll kill you! You're too emotional, Kaken, Izuku said, his voice dropping its friendly tone, adopting an icy, unyielding edge. You telegraphed your attack from a mile away. If I were a villain, you'd be dead. Suddenly, the two pinning horns dissolved into green dust. Izuku blinked, his telekinetic connection abruptly severed. He turned to look at Aizawa. The teacher's hair was floating around his head, his eyes glowing a menacing, brilliant red. The capture scarf around his neck was writhing like a nest of snakes. What did I say about using your quirks against other students? Aizawa growled, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. He blinked, deactivating his erasure, and his hair fell back down. He pulled out eye drops, sighing heavily. Both of you stand down. Bakugo, control your temper, or I will expel you right now. I don't care how good your grades are. Bakugo stood up slowly, brushing the dirt off his clothes. He glared at Izuku with a hatred so profound it seemed to burn the air between them, then turned and stomped back to the group, muttering curses. Izuku simply adjusted his uniform, offering a brief bow to Aizawa. Apologies, sensei. I was merely defending myself. Aizawa didn't respond. He just stared at Izuku for a long moment, dissecting the boy with his eyes, before turning back to the class. We have 3 tests left. Let's finish this. The sun was beginning to set over the UA campus, casting long, dramatic shadows across the track field. The final tests had passed without incident. Izuku continued to perform at an elite level, utilizing his horns for leverage and mobility. Bakugo performed with brutal, explosive efficiency, clearly trying to work out his rage. Finally, the class gathered in front of a large holographic scoreboard. I'm not going to bother reading out the results one by one, Aizawa said, pressing a button on a remote. Here's the total ranking. It's an aggregate of your scores across all 8 tests. Izuku scanned the list. 1. Midoriya Izuku. 2. Yaoyorozu Momo. 3. Todoroki Shoto. 4. Bakugo Katsuki. 5. Ida Tenya. 20. Midoriya Minoru. Izuku nodded to himself. It was a logical placement. Momo's creation quirk gave her unparalleled utility in nearly every test, and Todoroki's raw elemental output secured him top marks. Bakugo, while powerful, lacked the diverse utility needed to secure the absolute top spots across multiple varied tests. By the way, Aizawa said, a terrifying, predatory grin spreading across his face. I lied about the expulsion. The class froze. It was a logical ruse, Aizawa continued, thoroughly enjoying the shock on their faces. A psychological tactic to draw out your absolute best performances. You're all safe. Go get changed and head back to the classroom for syllabi distribution. What? Several students screamed, collapsing to the ground in relief. Of course it was a lie, Momo Yaoyorozu sighed, placing a hand on her hip. It was quite obvious if you thought it through. UA wouldn't expel a student based on a single metric on the first day. Actually, he expels entire classes if he deems them unworthy, Izuku thought, recalling a deep dive forum post he had read about Aizawa's teaching history. He just didn't see anyone today who lacked potential. As the class began to shuffle toward the locker rooms, exhausted but ecstatic, Aizawa cleared his throat. Midoriya. A word. Izuku stopped. He waved for Ida and Uraraka to go ahead without him. He walked back to where Aizawa stood near the throwing circle. The tired teacher was unwrapping his scarf, his expression unreadable. Yes, sensei? Izuku asked, his posture respectful but relaxed. You're confident, Aizawa stated, not as a compliment, but as an observation of fact. You have a quirk that makes you a walking armory. You've clearly trained your physical body to withstand the backlash of your own telekinesis. And whatever that secondary energy burst was, you've got power that rivals all might. Thank you, sensei, Izuku replied evenly. Aizawa's eyes narrowed. Don't thank me. I'm not praising you. I'm diagnosing you. Izuku blinked, his polite smile fading into a serious, attentive expression. You rely too much on your range, Aizawa said bluntly. You operate like an artillery cannon. You set up a perimeter, you create distance, and you unleash overwhelming, precise force. It's a phenomenal strategy for open combat and hostage situations. But it's a massive blind spot. Aizawa stepped closer, his presence looming over Izuku. What happens when you're fighting a villain in a 5x5-foot concrete room? What happens when a speed-type villain closes the distance before you can detach a horn? You pinned Bakugo today because he attacked you head-on from a distance. If he had ambushed you from the shadows, inside your guard, your projectiles would be useless. You'd hesitate for fear of hitting yourself. Izuku remained silent. His mind, always running 100 miles a minute, analyzed the critique. He hated to admit it, but Aizawa was completely right. His crowned arsenal excelled at mid to long range combat and aerial dominance. But in an absolute, suffocating close-quarters brawl where telekinesis couldn't be deployed safely, he was vulnerable. You have a god-tier quirk, Midoriya, Aizawa said, his tone softening just a fraction, though his eyes remained sharp. But a quirk is just a tool. If someone gets inside your perimeter, you need to know how to break their jaw with your bare hands, not just a floating piece of bone. Do you understand? Izuku bowed, deeply and respectfully. I understand, Aizawa-sensei. Thank you for the critique. I will begin incorporating pure close-quarters combat into my training regimen, Aizawa huffed, turning away. See that you do. Yui isn't a playground for prodigies to show off. It's a forge. And I intend to hammer out every single flaw you have. Get out of here. Yes, sensei. As Izuku walked away, heading toward the locker rooms, the sun finally dipped below the horizon, casting the campus in twilight. Izuku looked down at his hands. He flexed his fingers, feeling the calluses he had built up dragging trash across the beach. He was strong. He was fast. But Aizawa was right. He had relied on his horns to be his absolute shield and sword. If I want to be the symbol of peace, Izuku thought, his emerald eyes hardening with a new, intense resolve, I can't have any blind spots. I need to be untouchable at range, and devastating up close. The true training begins now. The first day of UA High School was over. And Izuku Midoriya had never felt more alive.